Well, welcome back to Dad's shed, and what we're doing here, and you saw me cutting off multiples of blocks, is we're going to look at the axle boxes. And these are the plans, but we're not going to use those. No, we're not going to use those. Why aren't we going to use those? Because they're too big to deal with, and I've got nowhere sensible I can lay them out to work with them. So they're going to be put to one side and go back in their tube. And what I've done is I've used the camera to take a couple of photos, which I've now printed out, of the areas I want to deal with. So what I've got to do is take one of these blocks, which I heated up and heat treated, hopefully successfully, last week, and mark them out and then start setting up to cut them. There's 6 of them. They are all the same size. They need to take my needle roller bearings inside, and I think I've worked out a sensible way of sealing them by using some slivers about 1 mil thick of PTFE rod, which I have. So I should be able to drill those out so they're just about clearance on the diameter of the axle, fit them inside the axle box, outboard and inboard of the bearing, and use that to seal the bearing from anything else that's floating around. So that's the idea. So basically when I bore out, I need to bore the middle out to the length of the bearing plus 2 mil, and then cut off some 1 mil slices of PTFE to fit in there. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'll get those out, I'll take them over to the bench. I'm going to have to clear some space on the bench first and start marking them out, ready to put them in the mill and start milling them. But one of the key things I want to do is to set the mill up for, if you like, a production run, so I can mill multiples in one setting, or alternatively have presets on the mill so that I can just drop the embryo boxes in there to do the machining operations without having to reset everything every time. That's the plan. I'll come back to you in a little while. Right, we're at the bench. Let's have a quick look at this. I've got the drawing here, and I'm going to go through this and look at it because it's in 1/8 lumps. So if I grab a piece of paper, let's do a quick bit of calculation. 1/8 plus 2532 plus 969 64ths. Right, 8 64ths plus 50 64ths plus 9 64ths, 3 64ths. Okay, so I'm going to have to make that a little bit thinner because I don't have an 1 3 64ths to play with. I've got 25 mil. So I will need to thin down a little bit. And I need to take 3 64ths off effectively. I'm going to go and do some measuring. Well, we're at the bench again. I spent a few minutes last night on the computer and I've taken my photo of my plans and I've put it on the computer, on the CAD drawing, and what I've actually done is I've taken the dimensions and converted them to decimal inches so that I can use my height gauge to do marking out. So I'm going to start off at the lowest dimension, or the smallest dimension, which is the back edge, and I've marked these up with a letter F for front, B for back, so I know that as I put these on there I can just go round one side and that's that one done. That's marked up, and I can just go through and mark all these with the height gauge. And once this one's done, the next dimension, and this is 0.9094 of an inch, the next dimension is 0.8125, which will go across that way, and divide them in half, and that's the center line vertically for the hole. It's also the split line where the second half will come in. So that's what I'm doing now. Yeah, I'll see you shortly. Well, we're now over at the mill. I've just set up and clocked the vise in. I've got less than 1/10 of a thou deviation along the length, so I'm quite happy with that. I've used the edge finder to center this and zero it on the DRO using the half function on that, and I've just put a 16mm cutter in and I'm about to bring it down. Now I have measured the top of this and it's at 1.927. I've remembered this time to actually change my measurement scale to inches rather than leave it in metric, which may help a little. I've got a couple of parallels down there. They're tapped down on the parallels, and I've also grabbed them together because I've got two in, and I need really to make sure I do these in pairs. So this is box 1 and box 2. They'll be the leading axle boxes on the Loco's frames, and I need to take that down from here in the middle down to 0.8125. So I'm not going to go through this because all I'm doing is cutting a slot down the middle. What I have done is on the parallels I've raised it up so that the center point of the block where I need to stop cutting, 0.8125, sorry, not 8.125, that would be up here somewhere. 0.8125 is almost coincident with the top of the vice jaws, so I'm not crushing it in as I'm cutting down. And as you may notice, all of it is marked out around the sides to where I need to cut now, and I did a lot of work with my drawing and converted all the dimensions to decimal inches to use the height gauge to do that. I have got an oddity that I'll come back to later, but it's confused me a lot the last couple of days when I was doing this. Right, let's get this down. All I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this on and I'll bring this up, and I've locked the travel on the y-axis across, so that shouldn't be moving at all. And I just want to get this, lock that off because I want that nice and tight. Get this to just touch. There we go. Just scraping the top edge there. Next thing, I'll find some gloves because it's cold in here. I'll put my chip guard across and then I will start cutting. I'll zero that for the moment, backwards and forwards, because I'm just cutting a channel through. Once I've cut this out, I will then measure to either side there and work out exactly how much I need to offset to either side to get to line. Right, let's find some cutting oil. I'm not going to be running this particularly fast, so I will just use some cutting oil and put that on with the... Now what are we going to go for? What should we go for on a cut? 20 thou? $1.9. So the cut is going ahead. I'm taking 25 thou cuts each pass. That means a total of about 40 passes. I've taken a fair few. I've taken 0.3 of an inch out so far. So yeah, another, well, let's take that as all 0.98. Just under 0.8 of an inch to come out. So 8 times 4, 32 passes, so it's 16 each way. Great. I've got a sneaking feeling I double moved that, so that was a 50 thou pass. Yeah, that was 50 thou. Right, let's go up 25 thou this time. Yeah, that was a bit better, wasn't it? Actually, I do 25 thou again. And I say I'm using neat cut. Probably the flood coolant would be a better bet, but I need to get the pump sorted out. Right, so I'm now down to 0.9. So I'm going to take it down another 75 thou to 0.825. When I get to 0.825, I'm then going to stop. I'm going to measure the sides, work out exactly how far I need to take each side out to get to the dimensions I need. And I'll leave it 12 thou high, and then I can just do a skim over the bottom on the last cut. So I don't want to be cutting against the bottom level while I'm skimming the sides. So I'm only going to take this down to 0.825. Let's drop that down so I can not get covered in swarf. Now 3 more cuts. I'm just going to tab this up a little bit. Okay, let's see where we are here. I'm hoping that as I'm doing this in steel, although it's a bit of a pain, it might be rather better than the cast iron, because as I found, as there are some fairly small sections in the cast iron on the edges, if it gets knocked they tend to snap off. So at least the steel should be a little bit more sort of ductile and less likely to have that sort of problem. Alright, let's find a small file to take those rags off. What I thought was actually a rag on the end there was actually some paint, a paint mark. Oh well. Alright, let's see where we are. Now theoretically, these should be exactly the same both sides. Let's see if that's actually worked. $4,600. 47.3. 4,600, 47.3. Right, so there's 13 thou difference. So that's not actually running right down the middle. Interesting. Now let's see what happens if I have a go at this end. 4.5. 4.7. 4.7 all the way down. 4.6.7. Four seven. 4.7. And that is 1.573. .575. So after a bit of calculation, I need to move this way 238 thou and that way 248 thou. So I think I'll do the back ones first. Right, let's see which way that goes. Well, we've been chewing through this reasonably well. According to my calipers, I am at 0.248. I need to take that down to 222. So that's 26 thou to come out. And on that I'm on 211, so 26 thou is, well, let's just say 35, so that's 24 thou. So I take 24 thou out, the last, but I'm going to stop at 20 and do some more measuring. So another 20 thou to come out. That's 2 cuts basically. Now, those of you who heard earlier, I was getting horrible noise out of this, and I was changing speeds and feeds and everything else, and I suddenly found that the way of getting around that noise is not to go slower, but actually to up my feed and just wheel it through, and it chops it straight out. So increase the feed, seems to take the cut easier. I'm not going to put a cut on the reverse. I know climb milling is not recommended, but it was doing quite well. And what I've done is I've just tapped up the tension on the slide so that it doesn't have the opportunity to really pull through. Right, one more, 30. There we go, chewing it through. Okay, I'm going to take that off. Let's try and clean some of this out. And I'm then going to take a couple of spring cuts, passes, just to see, because it's certainly taking some out on the way back there. I'll do 2 spring passes, 1 in each direction. Okay, so if I can get through here without getting in your way too much. I'll pause you there. Well, I've taken this down here, as you may have just seen. So, I've been chewing through with my new 16mm 4-flute cutter. I've come to the last couple of cuts now. Now, according to this, I'm at 225 is the closest I'm getting. 225. So I've got to take 3 thou off. Now, this will take some spring cuts, I think, so I'm only going to take so let's have another look. $21.5, so that is spot on, but I'm going to take just a shade more. I'm going to take 2 more passes up and down just to make sure that I'm clear all the way through. It's literally just touching. And that should put me exactly the same as the other side. I'm going to check now. I give this a wipe out. 2 things. One is I'm going to check that wall. So I need to take 5 thou off the base. So I'm going to go in just a thou on that. And then I just want to go up, so I need to unlock this slightly. Right. Well, there we are. We now have the first of the pairs done. I'm going to look at see if I can do it a different way for the next one. I think. No, I know how this works now, so I can actually just continue on. I know my depths, my settings are all fine, so I'll just do exactly the same for the next 2 pairs and get those sorted. Right, I've got 200 thou still to take out, but I'll explain where I am because I've changed things very slightly. And what I've done is I've gone from the 16mm 3 flute end mill slot cutter that I did the original piece with, and then a 16mm 4 flute cutter to do the sides, and I'm using an inserted tip 25mm cutter to just whip out the majority of it, because I've got to go down in or across 1.1 approximately. So if I can get that whipped out with the 24mm cutter, and it seems to be going through quite nicely. It's a 2 flute inserted tip cutter. I can run it a bit quicker. It's taking 20 thou cut, and I'm just going backwards and forwards with it. Okay, let's have another look. See where we are. .911. So we've got 100 thou to go. Just under 100 thou, so I'll take it down 75, 80 more. 80 more. So 1.48, and I'll stop at that. That's 4 more runs through. Now, the plan is that I will swap this cutter over to the four flute. I haven't changed the setting of the cutter in the holder, so that should sit at exactly the same point, which means I can go back to my original reading on this with the 0.8125, which will give me the correct depth at the bottom. Right, let's have another quick check. Now I want this to be slightly above my final thickness, because I'll do that with the 4 flute when I'm finishing off the sides. .832, 20 thou up. 20 plus 20 thou. Okay, that's good. Shall I take another 10 thou off? Yeah, let's take another 10 thou off. Okay, slacken that off and then drop this down. Well, having finished yesterday, just after I turned the cameras off, I had a quick look at wherever I've just put it, my embryo axle boxes, and suddenly realised they didn't look right. Now, I don't know whether you can actually see on here, but if I take my small square and put it along there, you will notice it doesn't actually line up, because the slot has been cut at an angle. That confused me, so I thought I'd do some checks this morning. Thankfully, because this is a 24mm cutter, I've got a couple of mil to play with. I know I'm mixing up imperial and whatever, but that's the way it's got to go. So I've got 100 thou or so to play with, which is handy. I think the narrowest gap I've got at the moment is this side, which is, I've got 20 thou to play with there, so the whole thing's over and across, so I'm going to have to be very careful with that. So I've just put a precision parallel in and I've clocked that. What the problem was is that this is a swivel vise and the base is clamped down really tight, and I clocked everything and it was fine, but I found that the swivel section, although it was tight, wasn't quite as tight as it could have been. So that enabled this, while I was starting the cut, it's actually moved it around and it's put a slight, probably about a 3-degree angle on it, which is not ideal. So I'm now back to where I was. none of the settings will have changed. It's just that this vice has kicked around a little bit, but now it's not kicked around anymore. It's back to where it should be. So cleaning everything down, making sure there's nothing in there. I'll put this back in and then I'll set up with the 16mm cutter, my 4-flute end mill, and I'll go through and make sure everything is sat down and sitting upright, and then I'll go through and cut it again. So just need to wipe those down, make sure there's nothing sitting around there that could possibly cause it to sit not square. Well, I'm now set back up here. I've got my chip guard, which is quite necessary. I'm doing this little job. It's desperately trying to cover me in pointy swarf. I've taken my first cut through. I've taken the bottom down to a depth of 0.814, which is a couple of thou over where it needs to be. It needs to go to 8125, and I'll do that once I've done the sides. I've taken my first skim along here, and it's taken a piece off this edge, which shows me that I have, that's on 0.334. I need to take it down to 0.222. That's 112 thou has got to come off. That's reading on 141, so I need that, take that to minus 0.253, and that should give me the right wall thickness. Right, here we go. I will go all the way through, even though I'm only taking a short cut off the side, because it needs to get to the end as I'm cutting away at the bottom as well. I've got quite a lot to go, so I don't want to be too silly on that. Actually, let's just take that up a shade, down a shade, so I'll give myself a couple of thou on the edge. $16 thou. So I'll need to drop down about 4 thou once I've finished cutting the sides here. Okay, let's have a quick look at this. Sneaking feeling I'm going to have to start looking at the bearings on this head. I shouldn't be making that much noise. Okay, let's put that down there. .242. 0.24. Oh. So I've got a slight difference here of 2 thou from end to end, and I can go through a couple more times. That will probably even that out. And I have things called files. 39 thou to come off. Right, where are we now? Apart from splintered. That's dead square. Excellent. Now I've got to come across the other side and see where we are from there. Okay, let's have a quick measure. I'm not quite cutting at the far end at the moment, so that's not going to be giving me anything, but it's getting close. So where are we? .242 there. 242 there, so basically, yeah, it's just touching there. So 20 thou. Okay, that's that there. Let's have a quick double check before my last cuts. And these should be, this should be 232 approximately. 2315. Two, three, two. So half a thou. One more pass up and down and that will be that. Right, so that's that one done. One to go. One to go. Two to go. One set to go. Right, I'll bring you back later. That's the outer of the axle boxes done. I now need to do rough and machine the inners to fit in there. But I don't, because I've actually got to cut some recesses to hold the inners in place. So that's the next little bit, which is going to be turning those on its side and going down the outside by 50 thou depth and width, just to give me a rebate either side that will hold the wings of the inners that I've got to now machine, if that makes sense. It should do, but it might not. I'll see you shortly. So, this is the last bit to do. I'll just run quickly through how I've set this up. DRO sitting here. All I'm doing is, because although this needs to be pretty accurate, it's just clearance. So I've worked out my limits. I can't go more than 40 thou deep or 40 thou wide, because if I do, that will get pretty close to the sides where I've got to relieve there. So I think I've got enough strength in what I'm doing as it's literally just to align everything. This is alignment slide. So let's put these on. I've got 20 thou cut on here, and I've got the stop set for 40 thou. So I'm going to run that in, move that across, and listen. As soon as it touches, I'm zeroing that, take it along, go across 40 thou. Take the x-axis to 0, run it back, take that down to depth, and then head across and down. So if I go across here, read off to there, when I get to 9.9 odd, there we go, zero that. Take that to 20 thou depth of cut. Drop it down to full depth. And that's that one done. So that's all of those done. I can drop that down now. That's the last of the axle boxes done and slotted to take the insert and just take that's what I'll do. Remove my jam nut from inside, just slip that on there, move the lock nut back, undo the jam nut. So that's that done. All it is an 8mm bolt which I've shortened with 2 nuts on it. And then I can just run across the edges with a needle file. Take the sharp corners off. All right, at here I've got one of the axle boxes there. That's number 5, and I've got the block that's going to fit in there. I've already done one side of it to check my procedure before I admitted to what I was doing. I've just taken that down So that is now the correct dimension up to here. And I need to take the centre down by another 40 thou. So it's got to go down to 68.5. So I'll do that in a couple of passes. Down the middle, on 0 on the y-axis. So let's take that up by, I'm only taking 10 thou off at a pass. This is not the most rigid of machines. Let's give it a little drop of lubricant. Okay, that's taken that down by 40 thou. I now need to bring this across, and coming this way I need to move out to minus 143. But I'll double check that as I go towards it. So again, I'm only going to take 20 thou off each cut. And as it gets to the last couple, I'll only do it in 10 thou lumps. I'll take it out to 100 thou, and then I'll do a measure to check exactly what I've still got to take off. Because the last part left there is only going to be 40 thou wide, so I don't want to put a lot of pressure on when I come up to that. Okay, let's see where we are. Move that a bit further forward and get down the back here a little bit easier. Point 08. Okay, that's good. So I've got 40 thou to take out. $20. $30. I'm just going to make a last check before I make my final cut. $49, so I'll take 9 thou off, and actually that will take that out to where it should be. Excellent. And then across to this side, touching them on 0. I need to take that down with a file, because where I took put that somewhere safe. Better. The rags from the first cut would have given me a very false reading. .5, 78.5. So that's got to take around 38.5. Go down to 138, minus 138. Right, so that's both sides of this now done. Hopefully, in a moment, that will only just about fit in there. So what I want is a nice tight fit. I will probably need to go over it with a fine file just to ease the edges and fit it. This is the time when a little bit of fitting is useful, and that way you can actually get exactly what you want rather than just a machined finish which is very close to size. Well, that is a wriggle in, push, fit, apart from the last bit where I've got to round the edges off to fit into the machine sides there. So that, I couldn't have asked for better, to be honest. That is precisely what I need as a fit. Right, so that's what we've got. You can see the two slots down there, two little wings machined on the edges here, and that will go down there with a little bit of persuasion. Won't slide in, won't slide out, and the only reason it doesn't go right to the bottom is that these recesses down the side are milled and are rounded at the end, and the wings here aren't yet rounded over, so it goes down as far as it can and then stops. I just need to file those edges round and that will then drop straight in. Right, crack on. 5 more of those, maestro, please.